Welcome to the AVAIL podcast, where we dig deep and talk about the art of leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, your AVAIL podcast host and lead pastor of Vertical Church, aka Iglesia Vertical in South Florida. Today, we're sitting down with Noah Alsamman. Noah is the digital media associate for Four Rivers Media, and today we're going to discuss the power of curiosity. So lean in, leaders, and let's get started. Noah, it's good to have you on the AVAIL podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's fun, Noah, because you and I, we get to work together behind the scenes on Four Rivers Media stuff, on AVAIL. It's awesome to see how the Lord just continues to grow us and lead us and challenge us, and to work together as part of a team that's working on a lot of things. It's awesome. It's awesome to see you grow in your giftings, in your talents, and your abilities. This is going to be a fun conversation. For those who are leaning in that don't know you, can you share a little bit about yourself, Noah?
Yes, I'm Noah. I'm originally from Kuwait, so a little bit away. I moved to Florida. That's where I've been ever since, Orlando, Florida, for I don't know, past almost 20 years or so now. So I'm definitely a Florida boy through and through.
Yeah.
I'm on the AVAIL team, mostly on the everything behind the scenes. So anything from the master classes to the audiobooks, even the podcast. I'll be editing this one, so I got my hands on all the digital stuff behind the scenes on AVAIL. But outside of that, in my normal life, I think I kind of have a fairly eclectic set of hobbies. I think I have too much to choose sometimes. I love everything art, everything storytelling. So literature, movies, books, music, guitar is one of my passions in life. So I'm kind of all over the place in that asset, but that's a little bit about me.
That's what we got to play guitar together one day. I think that would be fun. That would be fun.
Yeah. I like that.
So Noah, you've written an article for one of the editions of the AVAIL Journal called "The Galileo Effect." What sparked this article?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it was just kind of a symptom of where I was at, where my head was at. Another one of my big hobbies is philosophy, and one thing I've realized after getting really into philosophy over the course of the past 2 years or so is realizing that basically any science and any natural science related thing, whether it's physics or chemistry, biology, all these things kind of reach a point where there's less clarity and they become a sort of philosophy. And I was someone who in science class, kind of dozed off. It wasn't really my forte. I wasn't much interested in it. And that kind of opened up a whole new realm of interest for me. So I've been really into chemistry and biology and all these different assets. So naturally getting into the history of science as well. Galileo is the figure of the father of modern science. And when I was writing this piece for AVAIL, it just kind of coincided with that moment of his life where he was put on trial by the Catholic Church for his supposed heresy, and just kind of aligned. And I saw a really cool narrative to pull that together.
Can you do that? Can you walk us a little bit through Galileo's story for those of us who are either unfamiliar or haven't read about it in a while, and why you see him kind of as a model for this topic, this concept of curiosity?
Yeah, for sure. So Galileo is this 16th century scientist, mathematician, but at the time, science didn't really exist as far as we knew it. The only close realm to science was called natural philosophy, which was just basically theorizing about the natural world, but through the lens of philosophy. There wasn't a whole lot of empirical, observational, scientific method wasn't invented because Galileo invented that. So for about 1,000 years after Rome fell, like our entire view of the world was mostly theoretical. And a lot of it stemmed from the early Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. So Galileo walked in a really interesting climate. Europe's kind of in a really big hassle because the Protestant Revolution happened just about 100 years before that. And each country slowly over the course of that 100 years was choosing their denomination title, basically. Either they're Catholic or they're Protestant. So there was a lot of tension going on. And Galileo found himself in this place where he wasn't too interested in that whole debate. He was a devout Catholic, but that debate wasn't really what he was interested in. He was interested in the world and the natural way that things worked. And a lot of it was just the wonder of how these things happened. And a lot of people weren't really asking those questions. They were theorizing
Hmm.
about them,
Hmm.
but it wasn't really in the empirical, observable sense happening. Um, so he goes on and makes some of the biggest scientific discoveries. He's
Right.
most famous for the telescope. So he didn't invent the telescope, but he basically took these two glass pieces and they refracted together and made it so you can zoom and see stuff that humans couldn't even comprehend. Um, so that was one of his massive inventions, and that changed the world. He was the first
Mm.
person to appear into space, and I think there's this really cool image, and you'll see it everywhere when Galileo is brought up, and it's just him on a balcony with a telescope, and it really encapsulates this idea of wonder. Um, but also at the time, the Catholic Church has been the dominant force of power, political power, and everything regarding power for the last 1,000 years, and their power was slowly waning, and one of the big concepts that the Catholics really latched onto was this idea of geocentrism, which means that the universe, specifically the sun, rotates around Earth. But Galileo was a proponent because he could see in space that that's not how things worked. Actually, we revolved around the sun. And this idea might sound a little silly retrospect. It's like, okay, well, it's not a big deal. But at the time, this was really like the understanding of the world. This was what the Greeks proposed, and that was like dogma. That was truth. That was what you had to
Hmm.
latch onto. That was orthodox. So to question that, that's a big deal. So much so that there's this really funny story where Galileo is sitting by the telescope, and his friend, some guy who's also an associate of the church, he's like, just take a look through. I'm telling you, just take a look through the telescope and you'll understand. And he's like, nope, I'm not going to look through. I'm not going to look through because then it'll challenge my beliefs and whatnot. Um, so we really see this as the tension of where the faith stood at that time.
Hmm.
And then, of course, his story climaxes in him bringing this idea up, and then the Catholic Church putting him on trial. And then he's suspected of heresy, and then he's sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. So that's a bit of a summary of his life. But I mean, the big thing is he had big practical inventions and big practical things during the day, but really his legacy was that he started a movement of the scientific revolution. And then, even further so, that led right into the Enlightenment. So he is one of, if not like, such a significant figure in
Mm.
modern contemporary world as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes when you're not as in tune, maybe with the story or the history, you're sometimes unaware of how did we land on some of these things, or why do we believe some of these things, or who is responsible for us understanding this better. And I think this is always a good conversation. You describe what you call the Galileo effect, faithful conviction colliding with institutional resistance. Where do you see that showing up nowadays?
Yeah, I think that's a big question because it's kind of everywhere. I use a lot in the article mostly examples between the historic church and its collision with people,
Hmm.
but this is something you'll find anywhere there's any sort of institution, and that word can be defined in any metric. It could be regarding being parents, it could be regarding being a friend group or any collective group of ideologies. And it's about um, ideas that can be challenged and ideas that we're not allowed to challenge, that are taboo,
Right.
that are too far, too, you can't say that. It's like anywhere where there's these corporate form, and I think we see it a lot today because there's a lot of systematic corporatized things where this is how we do it. We've done this,
Yeah.
and it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is
Sure.
the the constant that helped us get to this place. And I think we'll revisit this later, but that concept sometimes is detrimental to a community.
Hmm.
Sometimes it discourages from, if you discourage from asking questions, it can often discourage from growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, here at Avail, we target leaders, Noah, and I think even this whole concept, this whole idea of curiosity is important for us as leaders, but also for the people that we're leading.
Hmm.
Because I mean, if we want to grow, if we want to reach more people, regardless of what kind of organization, or in this case, ministry or church, like myself, and or even organizational leadership, These are curiosity and the ability to kind of challenge how things have been done or how things have been, I think, is always important. Now, one of the things you suggest in your article, that fear rather than lack of belief is often what shuts curiosity down. And let's
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit. What kinds of fears do you think that sometimes leaders or groups are most afraid to admit?
Yeah, I think it can be different based on environment. I mean, certainly there's factors such as fear of change or things along those lines. But I think above all, it's the fear of being wrong. And what I mean by that isn't in a pride sense or
Right.
like your ego is bruised, but like, what does that mean? If you're wrong about this, specifically in worlds of ideologies and how we perceive of the world, if I'm wrong about this, what does it say about this belief and this belief and this? And it really is like this big magnoscope of things connected. I like to use the analogy of like it's like a brick wall, and if the way your beliefs are layered, where they're one by one up up a tower of sorts,
Hmm.
if one of those foundational things is say incorrect or off, or even just like you misunderstood it, that whole thing comes falling down like a Jenga
Right.
tower. Even like in like psychology and therapy talk, they use this example of like a bowl of spaghetti. And it's like if one of those things you try to fix it, you take out a noodle of spaghetti, the entire bowl is going to be shifted and everything's going
Right.
to get moved around. So yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to fear of being incorrect because a lot of that's where we find comfort and stability, and it's where we find our sense of identity a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And I think the solution to that is instead of building vertically, we build horizontally and we view it almost as a puzzle and we fill in those pieces. And there's times when you're building a puzzle and there's this one piece that's been there the whole time. And then it's not till the very end where you're like, oh, that's not the right place for it. And you just move it to the side. And it's not going to destroy the whole puzzle, you know. It still is intact and it still is a vision of something you're trying to achieve. Um, but it's not detrimental to the whole your whole journey on that process.
Right. Right. Yeah. It is interesting considering how one thing can affect everything. And even what you're saying, like, okay, if I'm wrong about this, maybe it's going to bring everything else tumbling down.
Hmm.
That's why I think it can be a challenge, even as leaders. There's a powerful line about how organizations slowly accumulate rules that once solved problems, but now those same rules create stagnation. How can leaders tell when systems meant to protect life are actually maybe draining life?
Yeah, I think this is an extremely difficult thing. This is because I mean, often you don't know you're wrong until you know you're wrong, or you don't know something's not working until it's not working anymore. And especially if you're on like a in a community where you have a lot of things moving, a lot of it's firing on all pistons, and things are just like it's very complex, then you can't have your eyes on everything. You're gonna miss things. And when you're focused on the day to day and how things are going, you can't step back as easy. I find this paralleled in like anything you're doing art related, whether it's writing or music or something like that. When you're so in it, you just get absorbed by it and you don't know what's not working. You can maybe tell something's not working, but you don't know what it is. And until you take a step back and then you revisit it later,
Yeah.
you can see, oh, this was the problem. But you don't get that luxury and stuff like ministry because that is your world. You're in that every single day. You don't get the opportunity to just step back and take an outside view because you're the reason it's still going. Essentially, you're at the top of the ladder, and like if you move, then things are just going to fall apart. So it's really difficult, and I think the only solution to that is outside eyes or people on different spaces of that ladder. Um, and in that sense, it becomes more communal because people will see things you won't see, and you'll of course see things that they won't see. But it's only through that collaboration of sharing perspectives and what's not working and what is working, and maybe where people think contrary. and really having the honesty to judge what you're doing, with clarity and freedom of being wrong, and not letting that act as a catastrophic event that will suddenly demolish the whole project. But the integrity to say that if you see something you're doing wrong, we'll fix it, and if I do something wrong, we'll fix it. And that's kind of the idea of the fear. If we remove that fear factor of that everything will just fall apart, and we know we can resolve and work towards these things as a whole, then it makes it a much more open and communal space where we're able to comment on each other's um, growths.
Yeah, I can't help but think of one of the lessons that Dr. Sam Chand often teaches is a lesson between vision and vehicle alignment. In other
Mm,
words, you have to have clarity on, okay, what's the vision, where we're trying to get, but then you have to have the right vehicle that's leading you in that direction. And sometimes the vehicle that brought us up to here might not get us to there. That's kind of what I'm hearing here, right? I'm thinking, and sometimes it might not even be that something's not working. It might be this. It's just there's so many better ways of doing that same something.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
of, you might be a little young for this, Noah, but back in the day, we had the rotary telephones that had a
Hmm.
disc on it. Some of the older people know what I'm talking about. You'd have to turn the number, and this phone was either on the wall or on your counter at home. You couldn't move it. You couldn't take it anywhere. You had to turn the dial, right? And then eventually we had phones, and then the first cell phone was this big gray brick or a big black brick. It was huge and it was heavy. Then there was a series of Nokias and then
Hmm.
Blackberries and then all kinds of, and now we have modern day, iPhones or smartphones, right? And it's not that anything was wrong with any of the other ones. It's just that today this is more relevant. It's more practical.
Yeah,
It's more functional, more effective. And I think that's at the heart of, sometimes we've been doing something a certain way for so long that we don't realize, oh wait, there's better ways. There's better
yeah, and
vehicles.
so much of that is trial and error too.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And being okay with it. Like being okay with, hey,
Yeah,
well, let's
exactly.
try this. Because ultimately it's not about, oh, we need to stay with the same vehicle. It's what's the best vehicle to get us to that vision.
Yeah.
I think this is great. This is a great topic for us to touch on, especially as leaders. Something interesting as well that you reframe. Thomas is one of those characters in the Bible that obviously he has a reputation, right? When we talk about Thomas, the disciple,
Mm.
who's known as the doubter, uh, you you actually reframe Thomas not as the doubter, but as someone whose questions actually maybe carried the gospel farther than most. Why would you say that, or how do you justify that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Thomas. He doesn't get a whole lot of light in the other Gospels, but in Gospel of John, he gets some really big moments, and I think some of those moments are overshadowed by that one big moment where we all know Thomas is the doubting disciple. One of my favorite moments with him is when Lazarus died, and the disciples are with Jesus, and Jesus finds out, and they're going to go travel to where Lazarus died, and the disciples are like, Jesus, last time you were there, they tried to stone you. They tried to stone you for going. So why would you go back? They're going to kill you. And I want to read this here. Jesus told him, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. And that kind of parallels that verse at the end where it's like with Thomas, where you believe because you've seen, and he's kind of
Right.
telling that to the rest of the disciples. And out of all the disciples, the one that responds to Jesus is Thomas, and he says, "Let us go, so that we may die with him." And it's like we always focus on him as the doubter, but he prior in the gospel was the one out of all the disciples who wasn't doubting, who said, let's go. And I see him almost as very emotional. um,
Mm.
he responds to when he's in it, he's like, let's go do this, I'm with you, Jesus, I'm with you all the way to the end. But when Jesus, after the crucifixion, I imagine he's like hurt and awestruck, and there's like, this is over. Like he's kind of like very emotional that way, where he responds to these events. And there's certainly something to be said about emotional leaders, in the sense of like overly emotional is not a good thing. But I think even more so, having a leader who's devoid of emotion as a whole, that can be equally as dangerous. So, I mean, it's about the balance there. But I think today more than ever, we're living in a time where emotion is devoid of leaders. It's not, it's something almost looked down on in many ways.
Right.
Because we're so analytical, we're so systematic, and we're, push and go, and everything's got a purpose.
Hmm.
But to really sit there and feel, that sometimes is overshadowed by the time clock that's always ticking. So I see that as something in him, and of course, the tradition and um, stories have been told about Thomas going all the way to India. And I think one of the things that really empowers someone like him, someone like an emotional person, is we just need a mission. And if we have that mission, we'll go farther than anyone. So I think some of that's just reflecting on what are our goals, what are we trying to achieve, and how do I get there? And if you just have that motive and incentive, like Thomas did, as soon as he saw the wounds, he said, "Okay, I'm in it. I'm fully in it." And he goes all the way, and he goes further than any other disciple. So I think having a mission is part of that idea.
Yeah, that's good. Cool perspective about Thomas. I think it's easy, to align or connect certain disciples or certain characters we see in the Bible with maybe the biggest known moment, but I think that's
Hmm.
great perspective. Great perspective on Curious Thomas, right? I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
That one of the things you share as well is about feeling spiritually stuck and exhausted by repetition before your trip to England. What shifted in you during those conversations that you witnessed?
Yeah. So for a bit of context, there was a portion of my life where I suppose I felt spiritually stuck, just kind of the limbo of things where things are repetitious, nothing's really
Mm-hmm.
happening,
Mm-hmm.
and um, just very stuck. And at this time of my life, I was going on a trip to England to film a certain video series, and the pastor I was filming with was kind of contrary to how a lot of things are done, and um, I didn't have much perspective going in. I was just there to record. Um, but the structure of the masterclass series was it would be he'd act as an interviewer to different people in different spheres of work, whether it's sports or film or music,
Mm-hmm.
and all these different people from all these different spaces. And a lot of it was oriented to helping kids in school and the school system to give
Mm-hmm.
them, whether it was good lunches or just financial support for their schools to thrive. And that was the motive of a lot of these conversations. So a lot of educators as well. And it was just I write about it, but a lot of this God wasn't even directly mentioned in these things, but it was just so tangible. It was
Mm-hmm.
like the presence and the concepts that were being conveyed. It was all kingdom mentality. I think
Mm-hmm.
so often when we're stuck in church world, there's such a beauty to it, but then also it gets a little bit mundane because it's like I feel like sometimes we lose the bigger picture because it's not Jesus came for the church, but he didn't come exclusively for the church. He came for the kingdom. And the kingdom isn't the church. The kingdom isn't education. The kingdom isn't a village. The kingdom is everything, all these things encapsulated. And sometimes we find ourselves in a all or nothing kind of black or white version where, you know, we use the word of the world sometimes is a pretty negative. And
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we have a bit of an equivocation there where we confuse the world as in the sinly whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
associate with it.
Secular, yeah.
This
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then but the world, like when we walk
Yeah.
outside and then we're like creation and beauty and community and all these things, and we kind of mix those two things up where in our minds they're kind of one and the same. But the kingdom is the world. The kingdom is the social communion of people, this and art and all of these things that collaborate. And I think that was something I really encountered in that moment was just seeing people from all different spheres of life, all in the act of helping each other. And it was just a really cool experience to see that visually. And I think ever since then, I've kind of been trying to incorporate that into my life in whatever capacity I can.
Yeah, it seems like obviously, no, I know a little bit about what you work on and how you work, even of what you've expressed, and it definitely seems like there's definitely a creative spirit about you and about kind of how you're designed and how you approach life. Even the whole concept that we're talking about with curiosity and questioning with a good intention.
Hmm.
Um, I can't help but think that there are people that are listening or watching right now that they might identify a lot with you. They might be like, I'm the Galileo in the room. I'm the
Hmm.
curious one in my work environment or in my in my where I'm living life and moving forward. What would you say to them? How would you encourage them?
Yeah, I think I'd start by acknowledging that that position is incredibly isolating. When
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you're the only one that can see something and everyone else is just going along like there's no problems at all, that feeling's isolating and you feel alone. And especially if you try to communicate that idea and it's immediately shut down, like your sense of community all of a sudden becomes devoid of community. It feels like you're in a room with a bunch of strangers, even though you can know them all and be close with them. Um, so I think a couple practical things I would say is integrity, being honest with your convictions and acknowledging your biases, and really just following this through. Don't act simply on emotion and don't act simply on analytics. Kind of try to balance that and figure out where this what is your heliocentrism. If we're going off the Galileo metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
another thing is honesty. Um, and I write in the an article to be the first to speak has consequence, and I think that's really quite true. And it's not about the truth claim of what you're speaking. That could be
Mm-hmm.
completely, it could be absolutely true, but still it will have consequences because it will challenge the status quo of what's already
Mm-hmm.
believed. Um, so honesty and speaking that out and knowing that if you speak on your convictions, it's going to have a result. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be quite a bit of both. It could be bad until it's good, you know. So, so
Yeah.
and then last, I would say grace, which might sound a little bizarre. Like you're the one being persecuted for your ideas, but so did Jesus, and what was his whole thing? Turn the other cheek, and really just like try to have an understanding that your perspective might be unique in this space, and that's going to be challenging. And I always try to reflect on the times where I have been in my own head about these concepts, and someone challenged me, and I pushed back so hard, and I'm like, no, no, that can't be. And we all have been there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things to just give the grace that someone gave to you, in knowing that you were wrong.
Yeah, that's good. Um, Before we kind of hit the final stretch here, maybe even on the practical side, what are a few small, tangible ways that people can begin cultivating curiosity in everyday life, especially if they feel burned out by faith, or in that way.
Yeah. Um, I think one of the things, speaking of Sam Chand, he mentions this a lot, and he's just live curiously. Live every conversation, whether it's with a friend, whether it's with your waitress, whether it's with your doctor, whatever, wherever you are, you have something to learn from this person. And it does, and take the hierarchy out of it. Like when you're
Yeah.
in, let's use the example of a church or something, you can learn just as much about the door holder from the door holder than the
Sure.
pastor. Everyone has their thing. Everyone has
Hmm.
something, and it's about the approach of going into that. I really like this quote from G.K. Chesterton, and he says, "The world will never starve of wonders, but only the want of wonders. Everywhere you look, you will see beauty and awe and wonder, but you have to let it in and you have to search for it. It's not something that's just going to happen. So if you live in constant repetition and mundanity, it's really easy to fall into the patterns of just looking at life really plainly. Alarm clock goes off, go to work, come home. It's really easy to just not think about the other stuff. You have to allow yourself to do that, and you have to want to. And I think that's the only way to add more color into life sometimes.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I like that. I want to mention, Noah, um, this is an article specifically that you've written. For anybody watching the video, here it is. It's an Avail Journal. Avail Journals are full of great content, especially great leadership content, great content for leading teams, organizations, yourself, and even topics like this, like your article, which is in one of these Avail Journals. What would you say about the Avail Journal? I mean, you're part of the family, Noah, but as far as I'm concerned, the quality of the Avail Journal is pretty awesome. What's your take on the Avail Journal?
Oh yeah, um, it's a one of a kind thing, and I mean maybe I have a bias because I work for the company, and but no, I mean that in full integrity and honesty because some of the most creative people I know in my life, whether it's the photos or the writing or specifically the people we get to be featured in these,
Yeah.
every walk of life. We have musicians and actors, and specifically lately like filmmakers and all these different spheres of life, and they all have something to give. And I think that's pretty thematic for what we're talking about today, because it's literally my vision of what I saw as the kingdom, like all these people from different spheres of life, and get to see it highlighted in a pretty cool way with some
Mm.
creative and talented people putting it together.
Yeah, that's right. If you're listening or watching this Avail podcast, I want you to go to availjournal.com, availjournal.com, and do your free trial subscription. If you do a free trial subscription, you'll get a couple of these free, and you're gonna love it. You're gonna get hooked. You're gonna want it. You're gonna want to share it with other people. One thing I can't do is I can't throw an Avail Journal away. It's just so good. It feels good. It looks good. Um, it really has great content. I'm happy that you have an article in recent Avail Journal, and I'm happy that people are just leaning into Avail more and more. It really is a great resource. Hey, before we go to the final stretch, and before we leave everybody with a little nugget, I always like to ask them just some off the cuff questions whenever we have a little bit of time. So Noah, for you, here's the here's a question I want to ask you off the
All
cuff. Off the
right.
cuff, what do you
All
like to do?
right.
What do you like to do for fun? What do you really enjoy?
Yeah, I'd say nine times out of 10, I have free time. You'll see me in two places. Either I'll be playing guitar for a while,
Uh huh.
or more likely, you will find me on my hammock in my backyard, reading a book. That is
All
my
right.
favorite place in the world, especially when the weather's nice and the ducks are out and my birds are at my bird feeder, that
Hmm.
gives me a lot of joy.
All right. All right. Here's a follow up question to that based on something you just said. What is a book that has resonated with you or that you've learned a lot from or maybe just been into in recently?
Ooh, I've been going into my classics recently. So a couple that I read were Orwell's Animal Farm. Another one was um, uh, I just lost it. Animal Farm. We'll go with that one. That was a
All
good
right.
one.
Good. Good.
I
Good. All
took a
right.
lot
That's
of
good. That's good. All right.
notes.
Here's another question. Here's another question. Um, what makes you laugh?
Ooh, what makes me laugh? I love a good. I'm a big fan of just clever jokes. And what I mean by that
Uh
is
huh.
like Pixar, something
Yeah.
like that, where they have this really clever concept and they're able to execute on it really funny. Or something
Mhm.
like Zootopia, even, we
Yeah.
got animals living in the city and they're just doing these really clever jokes because, yeah, an alligator would do that if he had a
Yeah.
job or something like that,
Yeah.
just,
Creative, clever comedy. I like it.
yeah.
All right. All right. Last question. What excites you or encourages you about the future?
Ooh, I think community, specifically around art. I'm a big, I love music. I play in a band where we go play a bunch of shows, and there's no feeling like when there's just a bunch of people together. We got other bands on the set list and stuff, and just the communal aspect of back and forth. They play music and we are digging it. They play music and we are digging it. It's just a really exciting thing. And then also just people of different spheres of life. Um, so artists
Yeah.
and clothes makers and stuff like that. It's
Uh-huh.
really exciting and gives me a lot of optimism, especially in a very digital time we live.
Yeah.
Those things come increasingly more rare. So having that and
Hmm.
the passion that everyone has of wanting to be there, they could be at home listening to it, but
Sure.
now they're there in person. That's a really exciting feeling.
Yeah, that is good. Let's wrap things up. Noah, what do you want to leave on everybody's hearts as we close up this episode?
Yeah, I think above all else, I'd say curiosity and wonder. Try to find something today that you are in awe of. There's a lot to be in awe of, but sometimes you got to go looking for it. So just look at the sky, look at the moon, go for a walk, sit in your room and just think about something. There's everything's there. Just got
Yeah.
to be tapped into.
Yeah, it's a beautiful world. We have a beautiful maker, and there's beautiful things all around us. It's important to be curious, open up our eyes, our hearts, ask some good questions, and see more, see beyond what's right in front of us. I love this, Noah. It's really been awesome just connecting with you and talking a little bit about curiosity. And thank you for the article that you wrote for AVAIL. It really is a blessing to have you here with us. And on behalf of the whole AVAIL team, which you're a part of, our co-founders, Dr. Sam Chand, Martijn Van Tilborg, we're thankful for your life, and we hope to see you continuing to grow and to pour out of what God's put in you to help people as they're walking on their journeys on everything they do. So keep it up, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of the AVAIL podcast. For more leadership resources, check us out at theartofleadership.com. Make sure to claim your free trial subscription of the AVAIL Journal at availjournal.com. As always, I'm your AVAIL podcast host, Virgil Sierra. Muchas gracias. Thank you for connecting with us to learn the art of leadership here on the AVAIL podcast.